to call the State Land Board meeting to order. Today is February 7th, 2023. I'm very pleased to be here as the new chair. Thank you. And with that, let's move to, I will call the meeting to order and we'll move to the consent items. Director Walker.
Thank you, Governor. Welcome to our humble abode here at the Department of State Lands. We're delighted to have you here. Normally you would have Secretary Fagan accompanying the board, but today she is having knee surgery for a sporting injury.
We wish her well.
We do, and her land board assistant, Molly Woon, is joining us via Zoom. So thank you very much. Our first item on the agenda is our consent item, which is request for approval of the minutes of the December 13, 2022 State Land Board meeting.
And do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, move approval of the minutes from December 13th, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. The treasurer moves to adopt the minutes from the last meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none. Do we need a second on this?
Yes.
I'll second the motion. And with that, any objections? Seeing none. Motion approved, minutes approved. We will move on to our action items. Item number 2.
Thank you, Governor. These will all go pretty quickly. Some of these are the sort of routine things we do here at the department. The first one up is the request for approval of a 7.1 acre permanent easement for an access road, water line, and water holding tanks for the city of Prineville at Township 15 South, Range 15 East, Section 10, Tax Lot 1100 in Crook County in our last file 63947. The authorities are set out below. The city of Prineville needs to expand its water system to accommodate existing and future growth. The expansion of that water system requires additional storage tanks, as well as new water lines because they are growing exponentially in Prineville, which is great to hear. Currently, they have 2 water storage tanks nearby on lands not owned by the department. But for the water tanks and water lines to function properly, the new tanks need to be installed at the same elevation as the existing water tanks. And those tanks would be then on Department of State Lands property. The department circulated the permanent easement application for public review and comment on July 19, 2022. This is common practice for us anytime we get an application. We only received one comment from public review, and that was from our very own archaeologist who reminded us to ensure a full cultural resource survey needed to be completed for the easement area. The city of Prineville contracted with a third party to complete that survey for the 160-acre parcel and found it to be a suitable location with no archaeological or cultural resources. To meet the requirements of Oregon Administrative Rule 141-122-0060 sub 1 for compensatory payment, the department has contracted with a third-party appraiser to value the requested property to determine the appropriate compensation payment for the requested easement area. Compensation for easements over school lands held in trust are equal to 100% of real market value. The recommendation of the department then is that the State Land Board approve a permanent easement for 7.1 acres of school lands located at Township 15 South, Range 15 East, Section 10, Tax Lot 1100 in Crook County to the city of Prineville under 63947 EA to construct, maintain, and operate an access road, water line, and water holding tanks. The easement will be issued for market value per OAR, Oregon Administrative Rules 141-122-0060 sub 1, sub A, sub B.
Thank you, Director Walker. Any questions or comments from the board?
Madam Chair, move approval of the recommendation and approval of the permanent easement in Cook County as described by Director Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. And just to clarify, we had no public testimony signed up for this item
Correct. We have no public testimony signed up at all for today.
for all today. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. And we have a motion from the treasurer. Any discussion? Any objections? Seeing none, motion moves. Next item.
All right, we'll move on to another easement. This is a request for approval of permanent easement for a bridge crossing over the Clatskanie River in Township 7 North, Range 4 West, Columbia County, and it's in our last file as 63960. The authorities are set out below. The Oregon Department of Transportation is proposing to replace and reinforce the scour protection for the US 30 Clatskanie River Bridge crossing. Scouring is a type of erosion that happens when water flows around the foundation objects and loosens the soil. And then the water carries the soil away, and that becomes quite problematic. The project is located within the city of Clatskanie on the lower Columbia River Highway at approximately milepost 61. The easement application was received June 30, 2022. The department circulated the application for public review and comment in September of 2022. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife provided comments regarding fish passage and in-water work periods, and the applicant noted this would be addressed with ongoing ODOT ODFW liaison coordination to determine if the project will trigger the ODFW fish passage rules. The existing bridge was included in an old blanket easement for Columbia County. So repair and or replacement of the bridge structure required a permanent easement. Pursuant to Oregon Administrative Rule 141, 1220060, sub 11, sub C, a compensatory payment of $100 was paid for the easement area. The recommendation of the department is that the State Land Board approve the permanent easement to the Oregon Department of Transportation, easement number 63960-EA, to maintain and operate a bridge on, over, under, or across the Clatskanie River. And you will hear that phrase a lot, Governor, on, over, under, or across. We just have to be very clear about what we're asking for.
Good to know. Thank you, Director Walker. And again, no public testimony was signed up for this
Correct.
item. Any discussion from the board on the item?
Chair, move approval of the staff recommendation and the permanent easement for ODOT's on, over, under, or across the Clatskanie River.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, for the motion. I'll second the motion. Any objections? Seeing none, motion moves. Item number 4.
All right, thank you. This is a request for approval of a permanent easement for a bridge across Illingsworth Creek in section 23, Township 1 North, Range 10 West, Clatsop County. Our last file 63873. The authorities are set out below. This one, Tillamook County Public Works is proposing to replace an existing culvert across Illingsworth Creek in Tillamook County. This project is part of the Salmon Superhighway, and Tillamook County Public Works has partnered with Trout Unlimited for planning. This happens a lot, Governor, with our state agencies, and we're very pleased to be involved in that. The culvert will be replaced with a 46-foot bridge to restore full passage for native migratory fish and restore stream function. The bridge project requires a permanent easement for use on, over, under, or across the publicly owned waterway, as well as a removal fill permit for in-water work. Trout Unlimited applied for a removal fill permit on October 12, 2021, and received an eligible general authorization notification on November 23, 2021, under 63557GA for that in-water work. The department again circulated this easement application for public review and comment on June 8, 2022. Two parties made comments, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and an adjacent riparian owner. The comment from ODFW was supportive of the project. The upland landowner did not have a supportive comment. Department staff found that the comments were not relevant to the use of a publicly owned waterway proposed in the application. Prior to this meeting, the department staff reached out to the upland owner and via email and telephone in an attempt to schedule a follow-up conversation regarding those comments, but the offer was not accepted. The county-owned bridges located outside of city limits are exempt from mandatory compensatory payments according to OAR 141-123-0060 sub 6 sub A. Therefore, no compensatory payment is required. The Department of State Lands recommends the State Land Board approve the issuance of a permanent easement to Tillamook County Public Works, easement number 63873EA, to maintain and operate a bridge on, over, under, or across Illingsworth Creek.
Thank you, Director Walker. And again, we had no previous sign up for public testimony. I will note on the item in the meeting materials, I think it was just a carryover. It should say Tillamook County and not Clatsop County under the subject line. So just, we could just correct that for the record. Thank you. And
I'm surprised and shocked I did not pick that up.
I think it's, just to clarify, it is Tillamook County.
It is.
And that was in the rest of the material. So that is clear. So other discussion on the item?
Madam Chair, just assuming that then the rest of the references, the section, the township, the range, that's all correct? It's just literally the name of county that needs to be replaced? Is that?
Let me ask Deputy for Operations Bill Ryan.
He's on the other side.
Yeah, that should be right on.
That is correct. I think they just cut and pasted and forgot to remove the Clatsop County reference.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Treasurer, and thank you. That on the record.
With that understanding, Madam Chair, move approval of the recommendation and the easement.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. There's been a motion moved to accept the recommendation. I'll second that. Any objections? Seeing none, motion carries. Moving on to item number 5.
Okay, terrific. This is an interesting one. You'll see these, Governor, as we move along in the work we do here at the department. The issue here is whether the State Land Board should authorize the sale of approximately 123.54 acres of subsurface mineral and geothermal rights on land located east of the city of Sheridan to the Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District. I didn't read all the things in the subject line because we also have them in the recommendation. So I'll forego that. Your authorities are set out below. The Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District is purchasing a property west of Sheridan, Oregon for conservation and to improve water quality in the area. Mineral rights of the property were retained by the State Veterans Affairs Committee in 1943 when the surface rights were sold. The mineral rights were subsequently granted to the Oregon Department of State Lands for the benefit of the Common School Fund. The Yamhill Soil Water Conservation District has applied for federal grants to purchase this property. A requirement of the potential grant funding is the ability to include the subsurface mineral estate in the transaction. The Bonneville Power Administration will hold a conservation easement, which will restrict any future development of the property and manage it exclusively for wildlife habitat, which is very exciting. As required by the department's policy, the applicant will pay the $10,072.72 cost of the mineral resource review. Through the Mineral Potential Review, DOGAMI, the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, had to remember that one, determined there is a low potential of minerals of significant value being present. The department policy is to sell subsurface minerals and geothermal rights on land with low potential value for a transaction fee of $10 per acre. The sale price for this transaction is $1,235.40. The department received a few inquiries of concern, which were when we circulated the application for review on January 2023. Oh, that was just last month. We are quick around here. We received a few inquiries of concern, which were quickly alleviated once staff clarified that the property would have a conservation easement on it. So the staff recommendation is that the land board release and sell 123.54 acres of mineral and geothermal rights located at Township 5 South, Range 6 West, Section 25, Tax Lot 900 to the Yamhill Soil Water Conservation District.
Thank you, Director Walker. And it was interesting to read the mineral report that was in the material. So very much appreciate that. Any questions?
Chair,
Or
move
entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, move approval of the recommendation and the sale of the mineral and geothermal rights.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I'll second the motion. Any objections? Seeing none, motion moves. Item number 6.
All right, thank you, Governor. This item is something the land board has been familiar with over a number of years. I'm happy to have the conversation with you, just what we're trying to accomplish here. The issue is whether the state land board should initiate rulemaking within OAR 141-088, rules governing the establishment of restrictions on the public recreational use of state-owned land to restrict public use of Crump Lake located in Lake County at Township 38 South, Range 24 and 25 East, and as illustrated on Appendix A. The authorities are set out below. When referring to the department's ownership at Crump Lake, there are about 1,500 acres of Crump Lake proper, which does not dry up, and surrounding that, about 13,500 acres of shallow lake bed granted to the state land board through the Swamplands Act of 1850. That says 1859, but it was in the Swamplands Act, and this is your history lesson. I try to give a history lesson at each land board. Section 982 granted to states to aid in the construction of levees and drains. And so these were granted to the states of Kansas, Nebraska, and Nevada. And then Minnesota and Oregon were later extended the provision of Section 982 in Section 988. What the Swamplands Act did was to enable several states to construct the necessary levees and drains to reclaim the swamp and overflowed lands therein. The whole of the swamp and overflowed lands made unfit thereby for cultivation and remaining unsold on or after the 28th day of September AD 1850. What's interesting is the Swamplands Act was passed in 1849, 1850, and 1860. And of course, Oregon was added in 1850. And I just want to digress for a moment because there's a great website that gave me a lot of information about the country's history. Wetlands were considered an obstacle to development in the early part of the history of the United States. People felt the need to drain wetlands and fill them so they could build on them and grow crops and build roads. But the value of wetlands wasn't really discovered until the 1970s. And by then, it was actually a little bit late. We've lost about 50% of our wetlands since the arrival of European settlers. So the Swamplands Act helped communities grow, but they also took away a lot of our wetlands. You'll hear more about wetlands as we move forward in conversations here at the department, because there is always, there's a rule here, no net loss of wetlands, and that's because we've lost so many so far. So back to Crump Lake, it's part of the Warner Valley closed basin system. And what that means is there's no water source but from the air. So the rain comes down and fills the lake bed. And when there's no rain, the lake bed goes dry. Due to frequent and significant drought connections, the larger lake bed surrounding Crump Lake proper is subject to extensive water recession during the summer months and extending into dry years. It can take multiple years for the lake to refill and conversely multiple years to dry out. Beginning in 2014, long before my arrival here at the department, we received reports from the Oregon State Police, the Burns Paiute Tribe, and the Klamath Tribe regarding vandalism and looting of significant cultural artifacts in and around Crump Lake. The concerns led the then DSL director to declare an emergency closure. You'll see that in Appendix B for all uses by the public during the low water conditions of Crump Lake. Several closures have been implemented several times since then, and most recently in July of 2022 by myself. Those emergency restrictions temporarily close the area in and around Crump Lake when low water conditions are present. Executive emergency closures have helped to reduce those negative impacts. However, the department has determined that the adoption of a permanent rule during low water conditions is really the most effective method to protect natural and cultural resources from looting and vandalism, prevent loss and damage to property, and to prevent damage to the environment in and around Crump Lake. The department has been studying those water levels at Crump Lake using satellite mapping. This data collected has helped inform us about the rulemaking process and when we should implement closures. If there is a closure, I will say there is no recreational purposes allowed because you cannot manage the lake bed. If there are some recreational purposes, you just have to ban them all. And then the state police will be able to cite persons for trespass who are out on the lake during these closures. Upon land board approval to initiate the rulemaking, the department will convene a rulemaking advisory committee known as a RAC to review and provide input on the proposed rules and related development. That RAC will be very inclusive and include members of the communities surrounding Crump Lake. It is my hope anyway. We will also gather input on the proposed rules during a public comment period. It says here in the meeting materials that we'll hold at least one public hearing, but I've asked my staff to hold two. We'll hold one public hearing in Adele, where I held a public hearing soon after my arrival at the department, and we'll hold a public hearing virtually. And I think that will give the public an opportunity to really express their concerns because the local community is concerned about closure of the lake beds. Because it is where they recreate, and they acknowledge that bad actors are pretty significant in the area. So we're trying to be respectful to our tribal governments and our tribal nations who are very concerned. And so we are hopeful that the Rules Advisory Committee can come up with a solution that would be amenable to everyone. Our rule recommendation will come back to the land board for adoption at a future date. So what we're asking today is for the state land board to authorize the department to initiate rulemaking within OAR 141-088 to impose permanent restrictions on public use of state-owned lands during low water conditions in and around Crump Lake, located in Lake County, as illustrated on Appendix A.
Thank you, Director Walker. Again, no public testimony on this item. Any questions or comments on this item?
The comment, Madam Chair, I appreciate the fact that this is a more comprehensive approach on this and other similar issues. We have sometimes had a tendency to just take an incremental approach of one at a time, 50 feet at a time, 100 feet at a time, or individual circumstances. So I particularly appreciate the more comprehensive approach that's being contemplated here. I'm ready to make a motion if you are.
Thank you. And my only comment is I appreciate agree with the treasurer's comments as well as the fact that there'll be both virtual and on-site feedback during the rulemaking process, and look forward to the feedback and when you come back to the land board on the issue. So I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, move approval of the recommendation and the authorization of rulemaking to impose permanent restrictions.
Thank you. I'll second that motion. And motion, Mr. Treasurer. Any objections?
No.
Motion passes. Moving on to item 7.
All right, thank you, Governor. If you've not had a chance to visit Lake County, I'm certain that you have in all of your travels. It is absolutely beautiful and stunning. So I did enjoy my time in Adele. We'll move on to our informational items. And before I introduce our special guest who represents Eide Bailly, our auditors, I wanted to make an announcement. I'm very excited about this one. This is our first informational item of the day, but it's a great day to announce that Oregon Public Schools will receive a record, this is a record amount, $72.2 million from the Common School Fund in 2023. That is the most the fund has ever sent to our K-12 students. We send those distributions out twice a year in December and June, and we just got word from Department of Education the day before yesterday that the amount distributed will be $72.2 million. How much each district receives depends on the number of students served. In 2023, Portland Public Schools, the state's largest district, will receive $6.4 million. The average district distribution is about $367,000. This record-setting distribution is $8 million more than 2022 and $12.1 million more than 2021. And I would say that having served in the legislature on the Senate Education Committee, I am aware that these funds are so important, especially to our rural districts. That might not seem like a lot of money, but it means a lot to these rural districts. So I really appreciate what the Common School Fund provides. So it is certainly uplifting to have this annual reminder of how day-to-day business like this morning's easements and mineral releases add up to real money for our school kids. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our special guest, Leland Miller of Eide Bailly, and he is on Zoom. So Leland, if you're here, staff has unmuted your mic, I believe.
While we're getting started, I can't resist the opportunity to add my thanks to the Treasury investment team. Those returns possible.
Well, duly noted. And thank you for sharing that. It's important to note, and thank you for your team, Mr. Treasurer, team here at State Lands for very good stewardship. That's good news. So, and Mr. Bailey, welcome.
Oh,
Mr.
thank
Miller.
you.
Excuse me,
That's all
Mr.
right.
Miller from Eide Bailly.
Yeah, yes, my name is Leland Miller, and I guess, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I am with Eide Bailly, and so Madam Chair, members of the board, appreciate this opportunity to be able just to spend a few minutes and kind of briefly talk about the audit and the audit process. After listening to the first 8 or 9 items, I ran out of breath just trying to keep up with all that information, how quickly you move. So I'll try to keep the meeting moving along. However, I noticed when my screen became very large, I noticed that right behind me, because I'm from Boise, Idaho, I have the big state of Idaho behind me.
I didn't want to say anything, Mr. Miller, but I do appreciate the map.
So it's great to be neighbors with Oregon. We love Oregon and everything. So just overall, first of all, we want to thank everyone that helped with the audit, both people from the Department of State Lands and from the Treasurer's Office, immensely so with Joe Flager, with his efforts, and everybody to have the information ready for when we started the audit. We consider overall the audit was a success in the fact that we met the deadlines and issuing the report for both meeting internal and also the state of Oregon's audit department requires us to have the report issued on a timely basis. And without their help, we would not have been able to do that. So we want to thank everybody that was involved. Briefly, in the actual audited financial statements, there are 2 reports that are ours. Everything else from the financial statements was prepared by your staff, which says a lot about the staff and their experience and expertise to be able to put together the financial statements. The first report that we had is our auditor's opinion, and basically it is a clean opinion, or also referred to as an unmodified opinion, that there wasn't any issues or anything where we needed to change our opinion when it came to the financial statement. So we're happy to report the clean audit opinion. Just one quick note about the change in the auditor's report. Before, the opinion was in the back, it's now right up front, and there is a lot more detailed information regarding what our responsibilities auditors are and also the responsibilities for management. The other report that is part of the audited financial statement is our report on internal controls and compliance. We are required as part of our audit procedures to go through, not only are we auditing the numbers and taking a look at the amounts that are being reported and doing our testing, but we also take a look at your internal controls over your accounting system. And we're required to, under auditing standards, that if anything comes to our attention, that there was a breakdown in internal controls, that we needed to report to management and to the board. We're required to do that. We're happy to report that nothing came to our attention in regards to the audited financial statements as well as in internal controls. And so we're happy to report that. The one other thing that I just wanted to briefly mention is probably part of the packet. There is a letter that is addressed to those in charge of governance, and that's you as a board. And then there are several items that are talked about what our responsibilities are, what management's responsibilities are, as well as did we have any difficulties, which we're happy to report we had none. There were no audit adjustments or items that needed to be adjusted as a result of our audit report. And also that there were no new audit or accounting standards that were issued that were applicable to the common fund. And so that's just a few of the items from that letter. If you get a chance to take a look at that, that'll provide a little more detailed information from an audit perspective. And the last thing I just wanted to point out is the fact that we are required to report to you in writing, but that we are independent from the common fund and the state lands. In order for us to able to issue a audited report, we have to be independent. We're happy to report that. So I guess that's a real brief overview from audit perspective, the financial statements, and also our reporting on internal controls. I guess I open up for if there are any questions or anything at this time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Miller, and want to thank you and the team, again, Treasurer's Office and State Lands, for audits take a lot of time, right? It's a lot of work and absolutely essential for good governance. So pleased to hear about clean bill here. And Mr. Treasurer, any questions or comments? And this is an informational item. So I think with that, Director Walker, anything on your end?
Oh, I appreciate Mr. Miller recognizing the high performance of our staff here. I'm very pleased, and it's nice to know we're doing things according to accounting principles, and it's just wonderful to have such great staff.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. And we'll close the informational item there and move on to number 8.
All right. I will ask Mike Wilson and Cal Mukamoto to come forward. And this is the Common School Forest Land Annual Report that Forestry delivers to us every year. Mike Wilson is the Deputy Division Chief, and Cal Mukamoto, as you probably know, is the Oregon State Forester. And Cal, you'll need to push the button to make sure your voice can be heard, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor Kotek, Treasurer Reed, and Deputy Chief of Staff Mann, and Director Walker. Thank you for having us today. Joining me at the table is actually Michael Wilson, State Forest Division Chief.
Oh.
But anyway, we are here today to brief you on FY 2022 outcomes of managing a portion of common school forest lands, which we manage under agreement with DSL. We appreciate this partnership, which is strengthened with solid relationships at all levels of our respective organizations, beginning with Director Walker, all the way through to DSL and ODF's boots on the ground foresters and technical staff. I'll turn this over to Mike, who actually has his boots on the ground more than I do, which I am jealous of, to brief you on the specific financial outcomes of our management agreement. Michael?
Thank you, Cal. Good morning, Governor Kotek, Treasurer Reed. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Michael Wilson, and I serve as the State Forest Division Chief for ODF. I'm ashamed to admit how little my boots are on the ground. I'm lucky to get out for a tour if the people are generous enough with me. But the department manages approximately 33,000 acres of common school forest lands throughout the state, covering geographies throughout the Coast Range, the Willamette Valley, Southwest Oregon, and in Eastern Oregon. We efficiently manage these lands to create and maintain healthy, productive forests and forest ecosystems to meet the Common School Forest Land mandate to provide Oregonians the greatest benefit consistent with resource conservation and sound land management strategies. These are working forests that provide benefits for fish and wildlife and timber revenue for the Common School Fund. Management activities include the design, sale, auction, and administration of timber sales, reforestation, road construction, and maintenance, which includes providing fish passage, managing access, easements, and property line surveys. Surveys for threatened and endangered species, public access, and a robust public engagement and outreach process. I'm going to highlight some of the financial outcomes from the report today. Financial outcomes are intrinsically linked to the timber economy, which can fluctuate significantly. We have been fortunate that throughout the pandemic, log prices have remained strong, and volume sold from common school forest lands over the past 3 years has remained above $400 per thousand board feet. Looking specifically at the financial outcomes of fiscal year 2022, the volume harvested totaled 10.4 million board feet. The average value of timber harvested was $448 per thousand. That results ultimately in $3.17 million being transferred to the Department of State Lands. The management costs were $1.28 million. So the result net operating income to the Common School Fund was $1.89 million. This is an increase overall of 68.9% in net operating income from the last time. Looking towards the future, our timber sales that were sold in fiscal year 2022, and we have a 3-year contract duration, so those timber sales are not yet harvested. They have a harvest volume of 4.98 million board feet with an average stumpage price of $454 per thousand board feet, which will give an approximate value of $2.26 million in prior to the Common School Forest Land management costs. Looking out to 2023, we have 4 timber sales. They include a mix of Common School Forest Land and Board of Forestry land. Most of our lands are intermixed, the 2 types of lands that we manage. Sometimes timber sales cross those boundaries. Sometimes they're 100% one or the other. Common School Forest Land harvest volume on those sales will be approximately 5.9 million board feet. The Common School Forest Land gross revenue will be about 2.28 million. And the share of project costs that will go back to the Common School Forest Lands is about $80,000. So that will leave a net value of 2.2 million, excluding ODF's management costs. Projected revenue for the next fiscal year 23, the revenue projection is 2.9 million transferred to the Common School Fund, and we're projecting expenditures of 1.3 million. The resulting NOI then would be $1.6 million. Short note on 2022 fire impacts. The 2020 fires are pretty much wrapped up and that salvage has been done. The Rum Creek fire did impact 1 Common School Forest Land parcel down near Galise. We're currently in the planning phase for a 45 to 50 acre salvage. We're working with the BLM and OPRD to ensure any visual impacts to the road, river, scenic waterway are minimal, including additional live tree and dead tree retention and feathering the edges of the unit. The volume expected from that is about 1 million board feet. We'll be auctioning that in either April or May and expect that the actual logging activities would be complete by this fall. And I'd be remiss to say that a generous donation from American Forests which is a nonprofit that helps folks reforest, actually pay for the seedlings for the reforestation of that. So we certainly appreciate that from them. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Good to see you, Cal.
Good to see you.
Questions, Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess one thing that occurs to me is to wonder, and I think you've told us this before, anything you can share sort of how the broader economic trends in terms of interest rates and inflation and general outlook affect your outlook on price and sales and those sorts of things. I recognize it's somewhat of an unfair question to speculate, but if you could sort of refresh my memory of how they interact, that would be really helpful.
Thank you for that question, Treasurer Reed. Yes, certainly when interest rates increase, we see, the reduction in housing starts. And of course, then lumber doesn't move as well. Typically has, an impact on log prices of driving them down. So far, we haven't seen that really materialize. Our timber, both on Board of Forestry lands and common school forest lands, are selling for a pretty good stumpage price. So this is a very strange market. This is not as direct as it usually is. I think it's been a bit of a mystery for all of us to try and gauge whether there's going to be a recession or what that's going to look like. So we are encouraged a little bit, though, by the fact that the Fed seem to be easing their ideas on how much more of an interest rate hike there needs to be. And so we're really hoping that actually timber prices are going to remain fairly stable. That being said, I know a lot of mills are not really moving the product at this point. We actually have a lot of unharvested volume on contract right now, more than is usual. We had last year we had very low harvest, probably our lowest harvest since 2001. And it's not because we hadn't sold the timber. It's just because they weren't harvesting it. They're waiting in that contract window until there's more demand and they have a need to harvest it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And even as of this morning, Chair Powell indicates that the strength of the job market may prolong the period of tightening interest rate rises, but I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you. I don't have any comments or questions. Really appreciate it. Read the material, very helpful. Obviously new to this, but really appreciate the time and testimony today. Director Walker, any questions?
Well, I actually have one out of curiosity. As I was reading the report, as I usually do, I'm fascinated by the sale names for these timber sales. Niagara Restoration, Beaver Nation, Duchess and the Duke, Harlan Hangover, and it goes on. They're pretty hysterical. Can you tell us how these timber sales get their names?
Well, thank you for that question, Director Walker.
Sorry.
No, that's a fun one. So foresters like to have fun. And so all of our sale names will have a basis in the geography around them. And so Duchess and the Duke, for instance, there's either going to be a Duchess or a Duke Creek, probably there, maybe both, and that sort of thing. Niagara Restoration, for instance, is up on the Santiam State Forest at Niagara Creek. And then there's a number of Beaver Creeks and so forth out there. So yes, that's
Harlan Hangover?
So
Really?
So Harlan is a place name out in West Oregon, and odds are, I do not know for sure, but odds are that is a difficult logging situation, which is going to have to force them to hang for their cable suspension to get that there. Yes.
The woman. Yes.
Absolutely.
Director Walker.
I really appreciate that. I have wanted to know the answer to that for years, and I just decided to ask it today. So, Governor, Chair, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to ask.
Anytime, Director. Good to know, little tidbits there. So thank you both for being here. And with that, we'll close the hearing on that informational item and move on to
Thanks, guys.
number 9.
All right. I'll invite Bill Ryan, our Deputy for Operations, to come up and give the Real Property Program Annual Report, which is always fascinating. And Governor, since you're new to the department, this will really be a review about the things that we invest in and what we take care of here. And so I think you're really going to enjoy the presentation. So Bill, here you go.
Thank you, Vicki. Good morning, Governor Kotek and Treasurer Reed. For the record, I'm Bill Ryan, Deputy Director of Operations for the Department of State Lands. It's my pleasure to provide an overview of the Real Property Program's fiscal year 2022 annual report. And as Director Walker said, since we do have a new land board member, I'm going to start with my presentation with sort of a high level overview of the Real Property Program, and then I'll go more into some key takeaways from 2022 and describe future undertakings. And do the technology. Oh, look at that. So school lands have supported public education in Oregon since statehood. The act of Congress admitting Oregon to the Union in 1859 granted the new state nearly 3.4 million acres of land for the use of schools. The State Land Board was established as trustees of those school lands and the Common School Fund. As the Land Board's administrative arm, the Department of State Lands oversees Oregon school lands, today managing 1.5 million acres of rangelands, forest lands, mineral resources, and more to generate revenue for the common school land. School lands are assigned a land classification of forest lands, agricultural lands, rangelands, industrial, commercial, residential lands, or what we call ICR lands, mineral and energy resource lands, and special stewardship lands. And the acreages of those lands are shown in Table 1 of the report. As you can see, the school lands occur throughout the state. Every county has some common school trust lands in them or school lands. Most of the timberlands are focused on the west side of the Cascades. Those are the lands in green there that you can see. And most of the rangelands and mineral rights are on the east side of the state. And the interesting thing that you can see in that distribution, if you look at the southeast corner of the state, is you see that classic checkerboard pattern of 1 mile sections of ownership. And those gray areas are the original ownership of both surface and subsurface lands. But over the several decades, those rangelands have been consolidated in the yellow blocks that you see, and those are the rangelands that we manage now, most of which are under lease. But at the time that those consolidations were done, the subsurface mineral rights were not exchanged with the federal government, and so we actually have subsurface rights to that gray checkerboard. So you still see that checkerboard remnants there on the southeast part of the state. And as you saw on one of the agenda items earlier today, we often are engaged in dealing with subsurface mineral rights. So the primary purpose of managing school lands is to generate revenue for the Common School Fund and distribution to schools. And this diagram shows the flow and relationships of revenue, expenses, and distribution to schools. It's kind of complicated, but the bottom line is that the constitutional revenue that is generated by the Real Property Program is that constitutional revenue that you see coming back past the little 2 cows there. So that's really the stream that we're talking about as part of the larger system of the Common School Fund. In addition to generating revenue for schools, school lands also provide abundant natural open space and fish and wildlife habitat and clean water, clean air, and other ecosystem services. They provide free access for recreation, such as hunting, fishing, camping, and hiking. And they support local economies through productive use, for example, rangeland leases, agricultural land leases, mining leases, and timber sales. Now I'd like to share some key takeaways from the 22 report. As I mentioned previously, the Real Property Program generated a net contribution after expenses of $1.38 million to the Common School Fund from authorizations and land sales. This number can change dramatically from year to year, depending on how much revenue is earned from land sales, as well as how much revenue comes in from timber sales. Operational expenses tend to be pretty stable, though sometimes there are spikes, such as if there are wildfire costs. This last year, we actually didn't have very high wildfire costs, which was nice. Revenue from authorizations increased by $650,000, but operating income remains negative due to expenses related to the Elliott State Forest. And so but without the Elliott State Forest expenses, actually program operating income would have been $2 million. So it is a pretty significant draw on the Common School Fund at this point. Wildfire expenses, as I mentioned, can be a significant expense. Unfortunately, we didn't have significant wildfire expenses in 22. And I'll mention that photo there is actually in the Elliott State Forest. And that looks like Katie Kavanaugh, who's a lead researcher for OSU that we've been working closely with on the transfer. And it looks like she's taking a core of that Douglas fir tree to find out how old that tree is. Livestock grazing remains the largest leased use of school lands. The department leases nearly 660,000 acres of school rangelands and forest lands for forage. And that is 85% of our surface ownership. So really is the lion's share of our ownership use. In fiscal year 22, 157 forage leases generated nearly $570,000 in revenue, which represents 44% of the income from school land use authorizations. The rangeland program also has many partnerships working on treating noxious weeds and juniper to promote sage grouse habitat, as well as wildfire prevention and recovery. So addressing forest land revenue challenges continues to be a priority. In addition to finalizing the transition of the Elliott State Forest to the new Elliott State Research Forest Authority, the department is exploring options to improve forest land revenue. In fiscal year 22, this effort included proposing forest lands in the Klamath District be managed by DSL rather than the Oregon Department of Forestry to reduce management costs and increase revenue on the more productive forest lands managed by ODF. That decertification process has been completed by the Land Board and Oregon Board of Forestry and will result in approximately $225,000 annually in savings. The department also has roughly 26,000 acres of certified forest lands that will be covered by the Board of Forestry's Western Forest HCP, which is currently in progress. Inclusion of the HCP will provide greater predictability and larger harvest volumes over time and reduce the risk of litigation.
Explain to the audience what an HCP is.
Oh, a habitat conservation plan. And that basically is a document that provides coverage under the Federal Endangered Species Act for take of the species covered in that conservation plan. So basically you're saying this is what we're going to do with this land. That will result in incidental take. The purpose of the activities like timber harvest is not to harm northern spotted owls or marbled murrelets, but they do get harmed through those activities. And so that plan has a plan basically of how much take will occur and what conservation measures the state will engage in order to offset that take to allow coverage under the Endangered Species Act. Thank you, Vicki. Okay, on to 4. So the Real Properties program strategic emphasis includes program and land planning, maximizing revenue to schools, positioning for future opportunities, and acquiring lands owned to Oregon from the federal government. And I'll get more into this in detail in terms of future projects and priorities. And there's the busy slide. So these are future projects and priorities. So the first thing is updating the school lands asset management plan. The previous 2012 real estate asset management plan, or the REAMP, is due to be updated. And so we're currently working to develop a new plan, which we anticipate to bring before the State Land Board for consideration in October of this year. Creating the new plan will allow DSL to identify effective strategies and procedures for ongoing management and stewardship of school lands over the next decade. The department presented an informational item to the Land Board in June of 22 that included a final performance report on the previous plan, as well as an overview of the proposed approach, process, and timeline for developing the new plan. Plan development includes, among other things, meaningful engagement with stakeholders and the public. So moving on to planning high-yield industrial, commercial, and residential projects. Oops, I wasn't supposed to advance. I'm just going down the list here. The Real Property Program will continue to work to improve and sell several existing ICR properties. There are nearly 800 acres of the South Redmond tract available for sale in a large lot industrial zone that has the potential to aid economic development in Central Oregon. The department is focusing on fulfilling its large lot industrial zoning obligation and is under contract for sale of the first large lot industrial zoned 200-acre parcel, which, if it is successful, will bring more than $10 million into the Common School Fund. The remainder of the parcel will be marketed in large lots of various sizes and shapes and could potentially accommodate semiconductor manufacturing. It's a pretty large block of developable land that's got utility access, highway access, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't call it exactly shovel ready, but very close.
The department has made those investments.
Yes, and the department has invested in that. And that's part of the strategy of acquiring these developable lands, which we classify as industrial, commercial, residential, based on their location near current urban areas and utilities access, that sort of thing. And so we go through the planning process to get them included into urban growth boundaries, get the zoning appropriate, do whatever required infrastructure investments are made, and then put those up for sale. Approximately 261 acres of the south of the Stevens Road tract near the Bend urban growth boundary remain school lands. We continue to coordinate with the city of Bend as the city works through a process to incorporate the remaining acres into Bend's urban growth boundary, meeting the requirements laid out by House Bill 3318 from 2021, which included designating lands for affordable housing and specifically 6 net acres for affordable housing for school district employees. And that was a kind of a nice little brainstorm idea to include that in there. And so it's unique and nice to see. The department is currently under contract for the sale of the Milliken Road parcel, which is a 159-acre parcel, industrially zoned, located on the western edge of the city of Prineville. So we've got multiple ICR properties that are being marketed or under contract at this point. So there'll be a large infusion of cash from those sales soon. Rulemaking for communication leases. Communication leases are a subset of leases that generate a large workload for the program. These are locations that have cell towers, primarily cell towers, but radio and television transmission as well, microwave repeaters, that sort of thing. Having a set of rules to specifically address communication leases will provide a more streamlined leasing process, keep pace with the rapidly changing industry, and update lease fees. And that rulemaking is currently underway, and we expect to finalize those rules and bring them to the board for approval this spring. Rulemaking for special use leases. So once we're done with the communication leases, we'll be focusing on the special use rules. Updates will modernize compensation fees and create a rule structure outside of the short-term access agreements process to address smaller uses and appropriate fees. In addition to updating existing special use rules, the changes will also create a new set of rules specific to renewable energy leasing. The department is also focusing on identifying opportunities for revenue generation. Approximately 1.27% of school lands are classified as having short-term or long-term potential to generate revenue through future authorizations. So the real property team is going to continue to actively evaluate future opportunities to manage those lands and improve revenue performance. During this examination, parcels deemed unlikely to yield funds for the Common School Fund will be reclassified as having minimal or no value, revenue potential, and shifted into the pool of acres to be evaluated for possible sale or exchange. So basically identifying the low performing assets or assets with low performing potential and disposing of those through sale or exchange. The department is also engaging in analysis of lands for renewable energy. The state's goal to go carbon neutral by 2040 provides an opportunity and incentive to increase school lands revenue through renewable energy development such as solar, wind, or geothermal energy. This has been identified as a high priority for the real property program through the strategic plan. The number of school acres being leased for solar energy have slowly increased, namely in Lake and Deschutes counties. And the Oregon Department of Energy has created a mapping tool that will aid analysis of school lands for potential renewable energy resources. So the department is now embarking on an effort to proactively market school lands for renewable energy generation and or transmission. There's also the in-lieu selections from the Bureau of Land Management. These are the lands that are remaining owed to the state from statehood from the federal government. That we are still owed 14 acres of federal lands in lieu.
1,400.
Yeah, 1,400. What did I say?
14.
Oh, well, no. 1400.
Difference.
Yes, 1,400. Thank you, Director. We have a memorandum of understanding with the Bureau of Land Management where we've identified more than 1,400 acres of lands that we might be interested in obtaining from them from their surplus list. And so we're in the process of negotiating with them for those. Most of those lands are forest lands or ICR potential lands. So we're still in the process for that. With most of those lands are in the Prineville BLM district. And so then, of course, there is establishing the Elliott State Research Forest. The department continues to work collaboratively with Oregon State University toward creating of the Elliott State Research Forest, which will achieve the State Land Board's vision of the Elliott as public forest that has completed its contribution to schools, but will continue to contribute as a research forest. The Oregon Legislature in 22 passed Senate Bill 1546, which establishes an independent public agency to oversee the forests, sets expectations for public accountability and transparency, and locks in the Elliott's ongoing contributions to conservation, economic growth, recreation, education, and forest research. We anticipate that the new Elliott State Research Forest Authority will be overseeing the forest on January 1 of 2024. And the prospective board of directors for the authority was appointed by the land board at its December 13th, 2022 meeting. Seems like that was just yesterday, doesn't it? The department has also appointed a transition director since we lost Jeff Huntington as our transition director. And that's Brett Brownstrom, who will work with the prospective board to complete the obligations of Senate Bill 1546 and assist in standing up the authority as a new state agency. And then finally, I'd like to touch on evaluation of certified forest lands. Identifying opportunities to improve the financial performance of certified forest lands remains a priority for the department. In 2019, the department for the first time hired a forester, an actual, forester to be a state or a department employee to begin the process of evaluating management costs of high priority forest lands. They touched on the Klamath decertification, but in June of 2022, with the support of the State Land Board and the Board of Forestry, we decertified 4,907 acres of forest land in the Klamath district, with an additional 1,920 acres to be decertified at a later date after they're harvested. Klamath properties lost more than $225,000 annually between fiscal years 2017 and 21. This is due to poor timber markets, low value species mix, and low volume per acre harvests. ODF has been managing these forest lands effectively. However, due to the low productivity and few near-term harvest opportunities, the 6,827 acres of forest land in the Klamath districts were optimal for decertification. And so future management of those will be really more focused on forest health improvements and fuels reduction thinning rather than preparation for harvest, just because of the nature of those forests. And those lands will fit into a larger portfolio of forest lands east of the Cascade Range that are managed by the department as non-certified forest lands. So certified forest lands are managed by ODF for the department. Non-certified forest lands are managed by the department. We also have a upcoming sale of non-certified forest lands in Hood River County that we're managing. It'll be roughly a 70-acre parcel to start. We're anticipating maybe $200,000 to $300,000 in the bid prices that will be coming in. And so we'll be going out to bid with those shortly, hoping to have the actual sale completed by June to allow harvest the later part of this year. And we wouldn't be able to do that without having our own forester on board. There's another 80-acre parcel in Hood River that also will be next on board for a future sale. And then we've got other parcels of non-certified timberlands, forest lands that will be harvesting in the future as well. And so finally, I'd like to recognize DSL's dedicated crew of 14 people in the Real Property Program who work on disparate and diverse portfolio of lands to generate revenue and maintain open space and wildlife habitat for current and future generations of Oregon school children. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this overview of the program, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Treasurer, any questions, comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Bill, I was glad to hear the beginning of the explanation on the, as you put it here, analysis of lands for renewable energy. And you mentioned as you were describing that marketing, I wonder if you could expand on that a bit. What does that look like? And what are the prospects as you
Yeah, Treasurer Reed, as I mentioned, there was this report, actually a study done and a GIS database and tool created by the Oregon Department of Energy, working with the Department of Defense grant, federal grant, that identified areas that would be basically the grant was really to identify where the conflicts of renewable energy development might be. But of course, then the converse of that is you'll know where the areas that don't have conflicts are, which probably be more suitable for renewable energy. So we can use that information, the data that we have, and to work with a marketing firm. And I'm forgetting the name. What is the name of that one from the National Association of Trust Lands Managers?
Oh, either, but
And we've had conversations, very preliminary conversations with a firm that markets public lands in particular for states and energy type lands as well. And so we'll be basically most likely doing some consultation with them and then some sort of a RFP process probably for the marketing of those lands. So we're really at the very beginning stages of that, and we'll be reporting more as we learn more about it, because it's not something that we've really engaged in the past.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I'm vice president this year of the National Association of State Trust Lands, which is very close to the acronym for your National Association, Mr. Treasurer. But we are all the member states that have trust lands. Not all states do. In fact, Some states got 4 sections when they joined the United States and became a state. We got 2 sections, sections that 16 and 36. Some got 1, some got 0, but all of us have the same interest. And so we share and learn from one another. And at our most recent conference in Utah, we met up with a company that works on geothermal and solar. And so we're very interested. That's always been an interest of mine since I came to the department, but there were so many priorities that it took us a while to manage this. And with the work that Oregon Department of Energy did with the grant, I think it makes it more doable for us to know where we can go.
One more question on that topic. Are there things in those early conversations that you anticipate might end up being issues that we should think about? You mentioned the conflicts about specific places, but what other things do you think you'll be grappling with in terms of, is it pricing? Is it the role of the department versus the developer, or just in general, what are your early impressions?
Yeah, Treasurer Reed, I anticipate the biggest challenge is going to be land use, because these tend to have a large footprint, both for the generation of the energy, whether it's solar or wind. Geothermal has a lesser footprint, but then a transmission also. And that actually is an area where we actually might have a significant influence, because if you look at the map of the state-owned lands, the energy production, renewable energy production potential is really on the east side, and really primarily in the southeast. And so this is an area with lots of sun, lots of flat land, not a lot of people, and not a lot of transmission. And so I think transmission is going to be the primary barrier, getting those transmission lines and sub facilities in place, substations in place. So that's going to be the biggest challenge. And that's part of what we need to learn is, what do those barriers look like, and how do we work with local communities, other folks that are trying to encourage this kind of development, so that we can basically collaborate, come up with a plan and a system that makes sense. And we are a major landholder in that area, so we most certainly will be involved. Other challenge would be potential conflict with it's a land use challenge, but from a different flavor, and that is potential impacts to sage grouse. Large parts of the southeast part of the state are under conservation agreements with the Fish and Wildlife Service to keep sage grouse from being listed as endangered. And so making sure that whatever facilities are developed don't conflict with that, that's something we'll need to be looking at as well.
I would also say, and I've mentioned it before, when I was in the legislature, I passed a bill that allowed the state of Oregon to bond for transmission. Excuse me, Article 11D of the Constitution was passed, and the Treasurer's Office at the time, which was run by then Ben Westland, had a legal opinion done that we can't sell to generate with dam power, hydropower, but we can bond for transmission. So we have a lot of state land, and no one's used the bill since I passed it, but I would love to really explore how we can do that. There was, at the time, Louise Soliday was the director of this department, and she had told me about a radar station, a former radar station, Air Force radar station in Christmas Valley. And I really, really wanted that, because there was a transmission line, and it's the value of the right of way, not the line itself, but that right of way was already established. But I couldn't get my bill passed fast enough. It was one of those 2-session bills. So a co-op was able to buy that transmission line for $1. I just was so frustrated by it, but at least someone is using it. But I do think we need to explore that more, and how we can use that provision in the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Following on I guess one of the questions I have is, what's the interagency work? For example, the mapping. The state lands already on transmission lines. Is that a conversation that's happening right now? I understand the idea that we have lands that are not, but lands that are. for future development. Is that something you and the Department of Energy are collaborating on? Is that something we should promote? Maybe it hasn't happened. I don't know.
Yeah, Governor Kotek, I don't think those conversations have happened yet. We did coordinate with the Oregon Department of Energy on the development of that planning map for where renewable energy makes sense in the state. And so we did certainly develop some relationships there, and we do plan to continue to work with them on that, but we really haven't had that level of conversation with them.
I've had conversations with some folks who want to develop renewable projects and start where you have that immediate connection. And to Director Walker's comment, we do have to talk about different ways for transmission or storage that aren't existing at the moment. So it's a multi-phase type of effort we all have to make to get to utilizing those lands for renewable. On the issue of the broader issues around, did you want to comment?
Well, I just wanted to say that there are a number of projects around the country where they're doing solar and wind in conjunction with grazing land, that you can do both. They're not mutually exclusive. So that's one of the areas that I'd like to explore. It would be new to our leaseholders, so there'd have to be a lot of conversation around that. But I think it has potential.
I agree. I would encourage them. The more multiple uses we can connect to the land would be very helpful. On the issue of our forest land, any conversations happening, either this agency or others, around utilizing our markets, our forests for accessing carbon markets and utilizing that way?
Yeah, I get excited about that one. So we actually have a request for proposal out for the Elliott to see the potential for carbon. And when Mr. Huntington was still with the agency, I asked him, I said, can we wrap in doing a proposal on all of our forest lands that we own? That was too complex at the time, and we're kind of needing to know about the Elliott sooner rather than later. So that is our plan, to do an analysis on our forest lands and see if we can use those for carbon sequestration. We have a number of inholdings, land that's surrounded by other land that we can access. And so those might prove to be suitable, but it's one of my plans for the future, and I'm really excited about it. I think it could be quite beneficial to the agency.
I think it's, thinking of different revenue options.
Yeah.
Certainly that's possible. On the in lieu lands, anything we could be doing different there? I'm particularly interested in if any of those in lieu lands can be in the ICR category that could be moved to residential.
Well, I have gone to Washington, D.C. with my compatriots with the National Association of State Trust Lands, and I have advocated for a quicker response to the 1,400 acres that's still outstanding. We had to sue the federal government in the 1990s to get our land. And at that time, the federal court decided that we were owed a little over 5,000 acres and that the acreage had to come from BLM. BLM has been short-staffed for years. There's been, every time there's a change in a presidential administration, then there's upheaval once again, and delay. We have put in our request a year ago, I think, to 2 years ago now, to BLM, and it's slow moving. So it's really, we need to kick someone in the patootie back in Washington, D.C. to get moving. We're not the only state that has this issue. Some states have their full complement of in lieu lands, but Oregon is still lagging. And 1,400 acres, we could do a lot with 1,400 acres, and they're not paying us interest on that land that we don't have. So it's just sitting there, and I'm frustrated beyond words.
Has to be BLM land.
Yes.
Because that's what they've determined.
That's what the federal court determined, that it had to be BLM land.
Any other questions, comments,
No.
Mr. Treasurer? Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Ryan, very appreciate that. And with that, we'll move on to the last informational item, item number 10.
Thank you. This one is exciting as well, and I hope you enjoyed learning about the many things we do here at the department. But Ms. Allie Ryan Hansen, our communications director, is going to come up and talk to you about our strategic plan because we've put a lot of effort into it. The land board approved it last year, and I don't want to steal any of Allie's thunder. And Governor, I know that you've asked all of the agencies to follow a template that's being yet developed, and we believe we'll be able to roll our plan into a template. But this is something we've been working on pre-pandemic. We started pre-pandemic on this and did a lot of work. So I'm going to invite my staff to talk about that. So Miss Allie Ryan Hansen.
Thank you, Director Walker, Governor Kotek, Treasurer Reed. For the record, my name is Allie Ryan Hansen. I'm DSL's Communications Director, and I use she, her pronouns. It is an exciting day. The strategic plan progress reports we presented over the past year have focused on project-specific updates. And today, we're going to dig into how those specific strategies are moving the needle or not on the measurable progress objectives for each of our 4 strategic goals. This is our year 1 results report, and we are talking numbers. I'm going to do this right. Before I get started, I do have a couple things I want to flag. First, the strategic plan was initially oriented to the calendar year. The land board approved the 2022 plan in December 21. The progress objectives that we're reporting on are aligned to the fiscal year. So the timeframes need to align. So we are now have a fiscal year 22-27 plan. The work's still going to occur within a time frame of 5 years. It's just we're shifting a little bit to ensure we get a final full year of reporting. If anybody's interested in signing my petition to have all fiscal years be calendar years, please see me after the meeting. And then also just to flag, as Director Walker mentioned, we're going to be doing some work to align our existing strategic plan with Governor Kotek's expectation that all agencies will be working off the same roadmap. Now, on to the results report. So in a bit of serendipitous timing, I found a book this morning on my desk from Director Walker for my 3-year-old daughter called It's About What Do You Do with an Idea, especially an idea that's different or daring or just a little bit wild. The kid in the book changed the world with theirs. We took our big ideas and we made big goals, big, bold statements of how DSL is going to help Oregon thrive, how we're going to support our public schools, how we're going to do that with exceptional service, and all within the context of having just a really amazing workplace.
It's a fantastic.
I read it this morning. I thought it was great. But as we know, if you're going to have big, bold goals, you need to pair them with the work you're going to do to make progress toward them and the proof that you're making progress. So each of those 4 agency-wide goals has specific outcomes, which are simple statements of results that each of those has strategies for how we're going to achieve that result and specific projects that are grouped by strategy. Just a quick example, within exceptional service, one of the goals, one of the outcomes is improve service. The strategy is provide fair, equitable, and inclusive service. And that is where all of our developing and implementing an equity and inclusion plan lives. That's where all of our examination of practices for serving and engaging Oregonians lived. All of those pieces are clustered there. But that piece actually touches other pieces. That's a joint strategy and a joint outcome with our great workplace goal, understanding that we really need to do that woven through all of the 4 goal pieces.
Before you move on, Ms. Hansen, I want to recognize this photo. The plaid shirted woman with the blue hat, that's Michelle Lisper, our legislative fiscal, no, it's our Chief Financial Officer, I got the two mixed up. She's new to our program area and asked if she could go out in the field with our staff. And she went out in the field. And it is such a beautiful, colorful photograph that we wanted to use it in our work. So Michelle really knows now what we do out there in the field.
I very badly want to make a joke about how we're outstanding in our field. I couldn't stop it in time. My apologies. Back to my train of thought, which is each goal also has specific objectives, and that's what we're focused on today, are those 12 project objectives that each goal has defined. Are we making progress or not? Let's see it in a demonstrable way. So what we're working on now is our 23-24 action plan that identifies specific strategic projects that DSL is working on in fiscal years 23-24 and includes both focus projects, which are major initiatives that significantly contribute to multiple strategic goals and related progress metrics and support achieving many outcomes. For example, that's the Elliott State Research Forest. It's our modern permitting and information system. It's the South Slough Wasson Creek watershed restoration. It is, no, I'm going to run out of steam halfway through. It is our wetlands and waterways program costs work. And then the final one is I'll come back to it. And then we should know it by heart now. Oh, it's our real estate asset management plan. There we go. We also have projects, smaller projects that advance outcomes. These are projects that help us make progress toward a specific outcome. We'll meet our strategic goals by achieving those outcomes. We have 33 such projects. How are we doing with those? 13% complete in year one, 79% in progress in year one, and 83% on track to be complete by year 25. I do want to note that some of those are also continuous improvement projects. It's just we're always going to be working on them. They don't all have a defined finish date, but we include them anyway because they make us better on an ongoing basis. Okay. Now to look through our specific goals and the outcomes and progress objectives for each. The first is exceptional service. The outcomes of this goal are improved service, increased access to information and services, increasing awareness and understanding of DSL services and our contributions to Oregon, and that we're supporting our staff and providing exceptional service. The metrics for this, first is continuous improvement in customer satisfaction. This is also a key performance measure for us and as well for all state agencies report on this KPM. We are meeting 4 of 6 satisfaction indicators. The goal there is to increase its continuous improvement, increasing with every biennium, with the overall goal of meeting a 93% target. So how we're doing is outlined below. The ones that we are not meeting currently our timeliness ratings, we decreased by 4 percentage points in 2022. The other one that we're not meeting is accuracy. Factors that we think may have affected those 2023 results, delays in service due to implementation of new technology systems, maintenance of our current website in anticipation of launch of our new website, which is another strategic initiative, staffing turnover and shortages, and an outdated permitting and information system, all of which we're addressing through current strategic action plan projects. The next objective is proactive communication. We're aiming to have 100% of our programs have a communications plan by the end of fiscal year 2024. We're 1 out of 4. Right now, South Slough Reserve has a communications plan. The next one is continuous improvement in reaching people. There, we're tracking how well are we connecting. It's people visiting our website, joining email lists, or following on social media, and we want to see continuous improvement there as well. 2 of 3 channels tracked increase. The one that did not increase was our website, and this is attributable to the unclaimed property programs transitioned to state treasury. When that program went, all the people who were coming to our website to look for their money suddenly went to treasury. So Treasurer Reed, there's a little bump in your website traffic for you. It's amazing how they all just swooped right on over. Okay, and then finally, the final metric here is continuous improvement and support for Team DSL. We'll have year one data coming in spring 2023. We need to, all the questions that track to employee support, how are we doing to help people do their jobs? That's going to be tracked here as well. And our employee survey, we do that every other year, and it's time in the spring, so we don't have those results yet. Okay, next is our Thriving Oregon goal area. Our outcomes here are enhanced lands and waters, widespread stewardship of lands and waters, and increased opportunities for students and teachers. The progress objectives we're tracking are continuous improvement in serving people at South Slough Reserve. We want to increase the number of people served annually. The target here is 10,000. The baseline was 1,300, and year one was 4,563. A little bit of context around this. So it's way low due to COVID-related visitor impacts. The visitor center was actually only open 2 months in year one, in the baseline year and year one combined. So visitors average over 4,000 in a normal year, staff tells us. So that 10,000 goal, while it might seem a little lofty right now, it's really going to be very doable when things return to pre-pandemic levels. The other two metrics in this category, we have one new metric. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my notes about the wetlands. We have one new metric. We have two new metrics. We're collecting baseline data in year one. And with these, we're quantifying several things. One is research projects and practices that are going to promote climate change and wildfire resilience for lands, waterways, and wetlands. And the other one is providing the tools and best practices that are going to help people be good stewards of wetlands, waterways, and lands by increasing the availability of those tools. We're putting numbers to those in year one, and we'll be able to report on those, the baseline at least next year with year one data, the year after that. And then the final progress objective here is no net loss of wetlands during the fiscal year. This particular metric is one that has a lot of peaks and valleys because the gains include the acres of wetlands created and restored, authorized during a fiscal year. The loss includes acres of wetlands authorized to be developed during a fiscal year. The numbers don't always hit in the same fiscal year. So some years you'll see a big drop, and that could be because, the mitigation bank for which folks are using to offset their wetland impacts, the authorization, that was the previous year, and the work is happening in the next year. So it doesn't always line up. This happens to be a year where we're seeing a 26-acre decrease. That does not mean, that we're still not losing wetlands. It simply means the numbers are showing in different fiscal years. Okay, next is our supporting schools goal. This has a singular, simple outcome. We want to increase net revenue for the Common School Fund. The progress objectives here are also all key performance measures. We are meeting 3 of those measures. We are not meeting 2. It's fortuitous that you heard the Real Property Program annual report just earlier because you are very, I think, familiar now with the 2 that we're not meeting. The percentage of forest lands program revenue used for admin and operational cost. The direct factor there is the Elliott State Forest and continuing costs of managing that asset that is not contributing any revenue. And then the percentage of program revenue used for all other admin and operational costs, the factors that are affecting that are the investments that we're making, primarily the investments that we're making in preparing properties. And then just a note on the percent annual increase in cash deposited. The year one result is 97%. The target is 10%. Looks like we're doing super good there, right? So that is the $121 million for decoupling the Elliott State Forest from the Common School Fund. We are seeing that nice little bump there. Finally, our great workplace goal. Our outcomes here is we want to encourage engagement and growth, support work-life balance, retain and share acquired knowledge. Because, as I mentioned earlier, our employee survey is happening in spring. We don't have year one data for this. So this is simply a note on, we'll have year one data for our perpetual employee satisfaction in the spring. And you'll see some of the things we ask questions about. It's our mission, it's support, it's what can we do better, it's what do we do well, it's teamwork, it's communication, it's all of those things that contribute to somebody really feeling like they're in a great workplace. And then we've got some new metrics coming along that we'll collect the baseline data for this year. And those are related to continuous improvement in work-life balance satisfaction and improving the retention and accessibility of acquired knowledge. And that concludes our presentation of our year one results. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer, questions?
No questions, Madam Chair, but appreciate the attention and persistence on data. Big fans of that. Continue to see trends now and make decisions based on that.
Yeah.
Metrics.
Yes, metrics are good. And first of all, I want to thank the staff for doing, I think, a very concrete effort to improve performance and also create a great workplace. So thank you. Want to commend the members of the board where I joined about supporting a strategic plan like this. I will look forward to hearing how the new directives align with your strategic plan. And just for those who are watching in other agencies, you talk about the high points and you talk about where need for improvement. It's, we don't want to just know what everything is going well. We need to know, and here's why we need some improvement. Here are some factors. We're focused on it. Nothing is perfect. We're not always all hitting all of our metrics, but that we have a plan to get there is the key. So really appreciate that part of your presentation.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Treasurer Reed.
Director Walker, any comments from you on this?
Well, I just, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this because we need a roadmap of how to get where we're going. And we need to improve on the things that we are lacking in and celebrate the things that we do well. So we've actually had a lot of challenges. Our website redesign has been a big lift. And one of the communications folks who was involved in that left the agency to go work for a nonprofit. But at least she stayed on as a temporary employee to finish that work. So we're closing in on that. I would also like to say that we hired 2 new communications folks. And Kate McCusker is our partnership community. How do you like to describe?
Our public engagement
Officer. And I've been wanting that for quite some time, and so has Allie, because all the work we do is public engagement, and we just need someone to be boots on the ground, and there is so much work for one. Katrina is our newest. There's Katrina right there. Kate is in Mexico on a pre-planned vacation before we hired her, but Katrina is also here with us now, and she is so good at the outreach that we haven't had time for. I I get all these Instagram notices now. The last one she posted was a salmon with a hard hat. And that was to discuss our essential salmon habitat maps and the work we're doing. So Katrina comes to us from an accounting firm in Portland where she made accounting fun. And so her talent in the communications realm is just really appreciated here at the department. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Director Walker. It is important. That engagement is what people are looking for. So they understand what their state government is doing for them, and making it fun is good. I'll look for the hard hat on the salmon. So,
Yeah, and what you just posted one the other day that I got notice about, which was hysterical. So I look forward to it. I don't do much social media. I don't have time in my life for that, but I did sign up for our Instagram account when I came on here, because we do have Instagram, and I am only on Facebook so I can keep track of my daughter and the things that she posts. So that's about the extent of my social media. All right, Governor, we and Treasurer, we're down in that part of the agenda, which is my other section, which I just throw sort of a hodgepodge of things I want you to know about. We're very proud of work we do here at the department, and I have a number of my employees in the back to celebrate our new chair, our new board chair. So these are a couple of things I wanted to share with you, and then we'll be done for the day. The first one is the department in December submitted our 21-22 report to the Environmental Justice Council, which is always a stellar opportunity for us to reflect on our efforts to meaningfully involve people in our work and decisions. I want to share just a few highlights. Allie just mentioned in the strategic plan work and development of our DEI plan, but I'd like to call out just a few specifics. We continue ongoing efforts to provide equitable, inclusive service both online and in hybrid environments. I'm particularly proud of our staff's proactive commitment to improving and expanding access to our services and information online. Our website redesign is going to be very helpful in that regard. And as you notice, we are closed captioned for our hearings that we have here in our land board meetings, which is really outstanding. We are expanding our staff capacity to support increased public participation. That's been a key initiative. As I mentioned, we hired Kate to be our public engagement officer. We've also hired multilingual staff who are available to assist with Spanish language translation services for the department. We've established a cohort of 4 DSL staff members to participate in the Interagency Uplift Oregon Equity and Inclusion Pilot Project. That's terrific. Erin, our land board assistant, my assistant, is part of that. We've added another department representative for tribal relations at the Cultural Resources and Natural Resources work groups. The expansion of staff actively engaging with tribes brings me to my next update. And I will say that I am particularly proud of this department. Whenever we have interacted with our tribal governments, we always are called out by our tribal governments for being very proactive with them. We engage with them on a regular basis. And in fact, I'm going with staff, excuse me, later this month to have a government-to-government consultation with the Confederated Tribes of Siuslaw Indians about the Elliott State Forest and the Shutter Creek facility, which we have done consistently throughout the work on the Elliott. But I wanted to indicate that our tribal training was implemented in 2022 to introduce all new department staff to Oregon's government-to-government commitment and how DSL works within that commitment to improve tribal relations. So our staff has all been trained. The connection and cooperation between the South Slough Reserve and the tribes is a continual source of knowledge and inspiration. Both the Coquille and the CT Klutzy are involved in the work we do at South Slough. One member of the tribe has a seat on the management commission. They switch off. So every 4 years, the CT Klutzy held a seat for 4 years, and now a member of the Coquille is on that management commission that I chair. Many joint efforts include reserve science staff and the Coquille Indian Tribe and the CT Klutzy collaboratively managing real-time water quality stations and discussing water quality data in Coos Bay. And the reserve's NOAA-funded Margaret A. Davidson Graduate Research Fellow working with the CT Klutzy to survey harmful algal blooms in the Coos estuary. The CT Klutzy are very, very concerned about harmful algal blooms in 10 Mile Lake Basin. They own the old Easter Seals property and have consistently raised concerns about the harmful algae that surrounds that property at certain times of the year. So the department has been working collaboratively with local organizations to address that. I'm proud of that work and look forward to the years ahead. We also, when former Governor Brown asked agencies to look at cultural artifacts and things that they might not know that they are in possession of. I had a light bulb go off at one of our meetings that our unclaimed property program, which we still had at the time, was a good place to review whether we were collecting cultural artifacts when people died intestate without a will. We had to go into these homes and clear out all of the belongings if there are no surviving relatives that we know of. And it was my suggestion that we do some training with the organizations that we had come in and do that to look for cultural artifacts. So that was a goosebump moment. I get goosebumps when I'm excited about things. And that one was very touching because we might not have known what we were missing before. Additionally, I want to give you another heads up that tomorrow we will be meeting with the Elliott State Research Forest Authority Prospective Board. That is so hard to say. I wish when we had started this project, we'd come up with a better acronym, but we did not. But we have our first meeting with that entire board tomorrow in Roseburg. Mr. Huntington will accompany us at that meeting. As you know, the land board selected the entire board at its December meeting. All but 3 of those were members of the advisory committee that I had asked to serve for 1 year, and they served for nearly 4. So they were eager to sign up for the board, which says a lot about this project and their commitment to this project. They have the prospective board has a lot of work to do to bring this project home. Thankfully, Mr. Huntington is staying on in that capacity to assist Brett Brownscombe in that work. And I look forward to bringing more reports back to the land board because we have some pretty significant deadlines to meet. Finally, my last piece of other, I'd like to thank you, Governor Kotek, for your GRB. Your governor's recommended budget. Our department requests were viewed quite favorably, and I really appreciate that, as does my staff. I particularly want to thank you for their creative approach to funding our abandoned and derelict vessel problem. It is a huge problem. It drains millions of dollars from the Common School Fund every year as we have to go out and clean up these vessels that are very expensive to clean up. It's going to be critical for us to stand up a program at the department working across with other natural resource agencies, and we have been working very closely with them to address this vexing problem. Standing up a program will help us be more competitive for NOAA grants and other federal grants that are available for us. But right now, we have no program. We just respond to the crisis, and this is something we've been working very hard on ever since I've come into the department. When I first learned, we spent $12 million to clean up a vessel in Gobel, Oregon. So I do think Treasurer Reed might have some comments about that because he's been involved in that conversation, as well as House Bill 2238 that you have allowed to go forward, which addresses fees for our removal fill program, which has not been paying for itself. And I will give you one example. The Jordan Cove pipeline project, it is now done for now. They pulled the plug on it. But we here at the department worked on that project for 15 years. I saw it when I was in the legislature. When I came, it was still here. They paid one fee, one application fee, and my staff spent thousands and thousands of hours over a period of 15 years. And there were no extra costs involved in that. So there are some removal fill projects that take a lot of staff time, and the fees are not commensurate with that. So we studied that quite effectively, I think, and determined that this program is not paying for itself and that we are having to supplement those costs through other parts of our agency. And we don't want to do that anymore. So those are my updates for you under other than to really welcome you here. It's, as I mentioned the other day, it's great. The last time we saw each other, we were both in the legislature together. And the interesting thing is all three of the land board members have served in the legislature, as have I. So we understand that process, but and we respect that process, but we are also the land board and the Department of State Land. So I appreciate your leadership to come on these issues.
Thank you, Director Walker, and to the team that's here. Thank you for the warm welcome. Appreciate that. Mr. Treasurer, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to pick up on what the director said, and I think she was being rather diplomatic in one sense. And she says other parts of state lands. Let's be clear, that's the Common School Fund. And I, for one, am not happy with the idea that students and schools are being asked to cover for a budget that is not sufficient. The director is right, but that is in large part because of the inadequacy of the funds, but it's also because the legislature has been willing to look the other way on that. I don't want that to continue. I think it is great. You found some dollars to support the worst of the worst when it comes to abandoned derelict vessels, but that is hardly the full picture. So we need to continue to do the work to fill that hole. Not the best metaphor, but it's a gap. It's funding that's not there. And I think I'd go even further than the director did when she said having a fund would make us more competitive for federal funds. It would make us eligible. We can't get them at all, as I understand it presently, because we don't have that vehicle to receive those funds. So good progress, and that is something to celebrate, but a lot more work that needs to come. And I me to continue raising that, because this is not the place for those dollars to come from. The legislature wants to say students need to pay for abandoned derelict vessels. They need to say that, not continue to just quietly expect the department to subsidize.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I agree with that statement, and proud of what we're able to do in the budget. And it is just a start. Many of you know when I represented the legislature, I was in the legislature, I represented a lot of communities along the Columbia River, and the abandoned vessel issue is huge. I'm still appalled by the lack of our ability to go after the owners and the insurance. I mean, like, we have very little tools there. So we, I think, have to be creative to work with our legislative partners about how to deal with that, in addition to, standing up a program that can, do more over the long term. So definitely supportive of that. And so I look forward to, supporting you in the legislature for the budget. And so thank you for that. I think the only other thing I would say is just because I have the opportunity, we are in the midst of creating a questionnaire for all the agencies of how they're going to have their internal conversations. It's going to be very simple set of questions. We're not trying to make it complicated of what every agency is going to do to meet the goals of the executive order around doing everything we can around homelessness here in state government. And the more I understand the lands that we have here, trying to understand how, even in the short term, we can be part of the solution for helping people transition to permanency, as well as supporting development of new housing. And I know that's complicated with our stewardship obligations as well. And you have the inventory of state lands, you know what we have. And the more we can work together to have this agency be a leader on that executive order, I look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, Governor. And I had that conversation with Bill Ryan a couple of days ago, asking him how we are currently re-inventorying our state lands with the direction in mind that you have just given us. And I will say that much of our land is very remote. So that would not really be helpful in transitional housing because those folks need access to services. But we are going to survey that land and see where we're at. And we'll have that report for you. And I do want to say, in response to the treasurer, one of our stakeholders at a meeting once said, when we were talking about the abandoned and derelict vessel problem, he said, these are school kids paying for adult problems. So that's something that just was very clear to me and is easy to communicate to the legislature that we shouldn't have kids paying for adult problems. So thank you for giving us a hope and a prayer that we might actually make some progress this year.
Well, and kudos to the Attorney General in negotiating a settlement that will allow us some flexibility to do some of these things. So
I would also say that the Department of State Lands fronted some of those attorney fees as well as the Oregon Department of Transportation. So I feel very proud that we thought they had such a strong case that we had the ability to front those fees, about $500,000. And those fees have now been repaid with the settlement. So I'm very pleased that we were a part of all that.
thank you. Yeah, it's a good win for the state and the country.
And more to come for the Portland Harbor because they were excluded from that settlement because there's a lot of PCBs in the Portland Harbor, and we will be working on that for years to come.
15 years of my legislative career. Portland Harbor Superfund site. Yes. So look forward to continuing that work with you. Anything else from board or staff? Well, with that, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Great meeting, everyone. If there's nothing else, we will adjourn. And I think that's it. We'll adjourn for the day.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.